Hi folks, I'm Duncan. Well, this is my video on chronic fatigue syndrome. I've been meaning to make this video for a very long time. I haven't planned it very well, so I'm going to forget a lot of things, but I will put some PDF links at the bottom of the video so you can click on, download them for free. I'll also include ideas for an energy diary, energy tracker, sleep tracker, all that kind of good stuff. This will give you a program to hopefully start the recovery process. Just check my notes. This is also really about becoming the captain of your own ship, plotting your own course, and not just hopelessly waiting for something to change. Okay, so I'll talk about what happened. I'll talk about possible causes. I'll talk about my own recovery process and where I am now. To put it into perspective and context, there was a time I didn't have the energy to get out of a chair. Now I've just walked up a small mountain. So hopefully that will give you some inspiration. But we'll talk about all that stuff along the way. Okay, I'll also set up a Facebook group that people can log into. Again, I'll put all the PDF stuffs up there. I'll put a place where you can chat, share experiences, what worked, what doesn't work, all that kind of stuff. Okay, well that's it for now. I shall play the video and hopefully you'll get something out of it. A lot of it is going to seem very simple, but really this is all just about lifestyle changes, and it's also about being disciplined. So sometimes when I started to feel better, I would fall back into bad habits, and then of course I'd become unwell again and the old fatigue would come back. So really it's about being disciplined with these things, keeping a track of what happened, but like I say, we'll discuss all that stuff along the way. So, see you at the end. It was some 15-20 years ago. I was living in Lisbon and I woke up one morning and I felt completely exhausted. It was, how can I describe it? I guess like a hangover, but I hadn't been drinking the previous night or the night before. It was also a very odd, unusual feeling, something I'd never experienced before. And also, even though I didn't know what it was, I thought it'll just pass. Unfortunately, days turned into weeks, weeks turned into months, months turned into years, and it was still the same. I still felt very, very fatigued. There were times that I couldn't sit up properly. I couldn't get out of the chair. Everyday tasks were very difficult. They were a struggle. And this was also after getting blood tests. I think I saw 3 or 4 doctors. There was nothing conclusive. And during this time, I was investigating, researching, looking for a solution. Even in my very dark moments, I suppose, or when I was struggling a great deal, there was always this, or often, there was this voice, my own self-coach, whatever you want to call it, that reassured me that I would recover, and when I recovered, I would share with other people what I did. So this is the purpose of this video. Okay then, let's have a look at some possible causes. There were two really that stood out for me. So let's talk about the first one, which is a post-viral infection. For me, I guess it was a few months before I experienced the fatigue. I had some kind of infection, and this blew up my lymph nodes. My lymph nodes were very inflamed, very sore. At the time, I didn't even know what lymph nodes were, but I soon found out. So I guess really this is, again, just my personal opinion. That happened. So I had some kind of infection. I was quite ill for a few days and also experienced inflammation of my lymph nodes. And a few months after that was when I experienced the fatigue. It was when the fatigue started, the chronic fatigue started. The other possible cause is lifestyle and an overload of stress. So for a very long time, I was living a very poor lifestyle, very bad habits, drinking a lot, smoking, all that kind of stuff, not getting enough sleep, not getting enough rest. The reasons for that, I guess the normal reasons why people do that kind of stuff. I think a number of things built up. So I had an overload of stress. So in that case, if that is the cause, or if that was a possible reason for the CFS, then the answer to that would be to de-stress. So a lot of the things I looked at, a lot of things I implemented were all strategies to de-stress. There are obviously a number of causes of stress. One of these could be a past trauma, a trauma that hasn't been dealt with or addressed. I guess that can also store up problems for the future if stress or trauma isn't dealt with. And obviously there are plenty of ways to deal with past trauma if that's something you've experienced. And obviously that is to deal with how you see fit. Maybe you could look at therapy. Again, totally not an expert in any of this kind of stuff, but I think really for me, it could have been a whole host of things. It could have been all of those things combined. And maybe my body, just like a computer, just shut down because there was too much to deal with. And it's my body's safety mechanism for not causing any further damage. Some people did also suggest to me that it was caused by depression, but that to me, at the time, and even now, I'm not entirely sure about, because obviously when you've been feeling fatigued for a very long time and there's no light at the end of the tunnel and you can't see how you're going to recover, then obviously that puts you in a kind of an abyss, puts you in a dark place. So whether depression came before or after or during, it's not conclusive to me, but again, it might be something that you want to look at. So those, in my opinion, are the possible causes. There could, of course, be more. That is something for other people, for yourselves to investigate. But that is my conclusion. It's all in your mind. I'm not entirely sure what people mean when they say that. When someone says it's all in your mind, do they mean you're just imagining the symptoms? I don't know. I think if there is any possible connection, maybe it might be like the old saying, to worry yourself sick. So if you can worry yourself sick, then you can also engage your mind to make something better. But I think it's all in your mind. It doesn't work for me. As anybody knows who is suffering from it now or has suffered from it, it's certainly not your imagination. You don't really imagine being exhausted. But it did give me another avenue, another tool, another strategy, made me think about stress. So, like the old saying says, if you can worry yourself sick, perhaps you can use your mind considering things like stress, trauma. Maybe that was all part of the toolkit that you need. And it made me think along those lines of what else could I do? Okay, food. Food, unfortunately, like lots of other things, has become very tribal, hasn't it? I'm going to keep this brief. I'm just going to say really what has worked for me. And, it may sound a little bit silly, but the importance of it that I discovered. For example, we all know sugar is very bad for us. However, I very vividly remember a time many years ago when I was I was having a good day, unusually. So if we look at energy levels from, let's say, 1 to 10, I was at a 5.5, which was very unusual for me. So I decided to treat myself, and I bought a big cake. Well, a Chelsea bun, whatever it was, something like that. And I sat down, I took 1 or 2 bites out of it, and had a complete crash. So this put into my mind that I really needed to experiment with different foods, diets, and to see which I did the best on. Which I concluded was some fruit, some veg, meat, nuts, what I would describe as a paleo diet. The reason being is I looked at what we ate naturally as a human species before agriculture, all that kind of stuff. With meat, I fortunately have lived in countries and still live in a country where you can go out into the countryside, you can see the cattle, you can see that they're eating grass, they're all grass-fed, they all look happy, healthy. I don't know, do cattle look healthy? They certainly don't look distressed or anything like that. They're wandering around in fields, in the countryside, eating their natural food. So that is what I stick to. I think maybe you could look at it as what not to eat as opposed to what to eat. But this is something that it is up to you to experiment with different things. I certainly know that in my darkest times, I would have pretty much tried anything. So, well, okay, what to avoid? Well, what you definitely shouldn't do is eat processed food, sugar, junk food, all that kind of stuff.
So if you're going to try a new dietary plan, then that really should be the first thing you do. Get rid of all that stuff. And like lots of other things, it is much easier and much better to not even have it in your house. So you're taking away a part of that willpower, or the need not to eat something, or what am I trying to say? So if it's not there, you're not going to eat it, and it's much easier to do it that way. So if you do have all that kind of stuff in your house at the moment, then perhaps think of getting rid of it as a start.
Hydration, keeping hydrated. What made me think I wasn't drinking enough water was I'd been sleeping. I'd been unusually, for me, sleeping well. I hadn't been waking up in a night, what I thought was a good night's sleep. But I'd wake up in the morning feeling pretty rough, feeling drained, and I just instinctively had, I think I drank half a litre of water and carried on drinking, and I felt it perk me up. And so then I started to become more disciplined about drinking water and keeping hydrated. One of the ways I did this, and I still do it, I still forget sometimes to keep hydrated, and I pay for it. But one of the ways I do this is I get 1.5 litre of water. I keep it somewhere it's visible, or I keep it in the fridge, so every time I go into the fridge I can see it and okay, yeah, I need to have a drink. And when that's empty, fill it back up. So I'm probably drinking anywhere from 2 to 3 litres of water per day. If water's boring, then you can always get yourself a glass jug, fill it with, put some herbal tea in there, some ginger, some lemon, spice it up a bit. And again, just leave it somewhere you can see it to be a constant reminder that you need to keep hydrated. Exercise. So exercise, movement, stretching. These, again, are part of my daily life now. So, although when you first start implementing this, then it is really important to go slowly, go gently. Don't go down the gym and try and lift up a great big rack of weights. You can start very gently. There are of course lots of videos on YouTube or any other platform sharing site, and you can look for exercises or exercise routines designed for senior people. Start with that. If you feel yourself, or if you have a wave of exhaustion coming over you, then just stop. You can stop. You can go back to it. You don't have to think about running a marathon. Just nice and gentle exercises. And then as you're feeling better, as you're getting more energy, you can up the ante, as it were. Nowadays I do pretty rigorous exercise. And so it's a matter of finding a balance between creating energy through exercise without putting too much stress on yourself, obviously your body. Walking's great. Why not go for a walk? Nice and gentle. Start off slow, build up. That's the way to go.
So I decided to put meditation and nature together. The reason being is I find being in nature very meditative and helps me to relax. I think many of us are drawn to fires, we're drawn to water, and we're drawn to the earth. So this is a combination that helps me anyway to calm, to de-stress, and is also a great place in that case to meditate. I remember, it's quite a few years ago now, I was going for a gentle walk in the local park, and it was a lovely summer's day, which obviously, being English, is something to be grateful for when it's sunny. And it was full of families, children laughing, playing, families together. And I just sat on a park bench, closed my eyes, and listened to the sounds. Listened to the sounds of the people, listened to the sounds of the birds, to the trees rustling, all the sounds of nature, which for me puts me in the present moment. I'm not thinking about the past, I'm not thinking about the future, I'm in the present. I find it very grounding, beneficial, etc. Again, very easy thing to do. For example, as I just briefly explained, you could meditate on the sounds, you can feel the breeze, you can focus on the breeze on your skin. Time-wise, 5 minutes a day is good. 5 minutes a day is better than no minutes a day. If you have a nice garden, if you have a nice park nearby, if you don't make an effort, in that case, to get out into the countryside and immerse yourself in it, be in the present, be in the moment. Okay, so visualization. Why do I do it? Okay, well, it helps me to keep on track to where I want to go. So I visualize on being on a small yacht in the ocean with winds in my sails, feeling excited, enthusiastic and grateful to be alive. That's one of my visualizations. And it helps me to, again, comes back down to the discipline. It helps me to stay on track, keep on the right path, and gives me something to strive for. I also used to visualize, I don't do this as much anymore these days because it's not really necessary, but when I was feeling very fatigued, I used to recall a time when I was younger and full of energy, full of life, full of energy, full of life. And for example, I'd visualize myself or recall a time when I was playing rugby or taking my dog for a walk, a very energetic walk. And I would say that in both cases, if you're recalling something like that, or if you're visualizing somewhere you want to be in the future, then a really good way to do it, to make it more powerful, is to imagine and try and feel the emotions that either you're recalling, to recall how you felt to really put yourself back at that time. How did you feel in the pit of your stomach? Was your heart beating? Was your heart racing? For me, to visualize, when I'm visualizing the future, I feel the emotion of great gratitude, great energy, great excitement. This makes it all the more powerful, and some might say it helps to connect more with the subconscious mind. Which, is that true? Is it not? I don't know, but I find it helpful and beneficial. You can also, if you don't have the energy to go out, or it's not viable for you to go and sit in greenery or in nature, there are, of course, lots of videos on YouTube you can watch, guided meditations, and then in that case it will just be a process of going through them, seeing which ones you like, and sticking with it and making it a part of your daily routine. Visualization. Why does it help, or why do I believe it helps? Well, visualization has of course been used for a very long time in human history, and for me, if I sit down, visualize, kind of like in a meditation type of way, it keeps me on course. It helps to keep me motivated, helps to keep me moving in the right direction. It helps me to keep my discipline with all the strategies that I've implemented into my life. And so that's why I've made it a part of my daily routine. You can, of course, it is up to you, of course, what you want to visualize, but for me, I visualize a time in the future where I'm on a small yacht, and I'm full of energy, and I can feel the wind in the sails. I've also visualized myself in the past when I had a lot of energy, so maybe I was at school playing rugby or something like that, something along those lines. But I think really for me the most important thing is to integrate into your mind, some might call it the subconsciousness, to get it integrated into your mind where your destination is and how you're going to get there. Gratitude. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Duncan, I feel horrendous. Why on earth would I give gratitude at the moment? Well, again, it helps when you're going through a difficult time, when you're going through a struggle. It helps to keep things, for me anyway, personally, it helps for me to keep things in context, and helps me to put things into perspective. I remember many years ago when I used to live in Thailand, there was a man who lived in the neighbourhood, and he got around on a skateboard because he didn't have any arms or legs. But he was a very, very positive person, always had a big smile on his face. And I often used to wonder, how can he stay so positive given his circumstances? Well, that's kind of inspiring for me. And, it has inspired me for a long time. That was some 25 years ago, and I still remember him. I can still recall him. I can still see his face. I can still feel his positivity. And the reality is, it could be a lot worse. I mean, I'm still alive. And there are people in very bad, worse situations, younger than me. So I think it just helps you get through the darker periods. I think that it helps dissolve any feelings of bitterness or resentment, which I could be prey to. So if I started thinking about all the lost hours, the lost days, months, years, weeks, I could fall into the trap of being very bitter and very resentful, which of course, very negative emotions, very negative feelings. So I find that by giving gratitude, practicing gratitude, it helps me combat those negative feelings. So how do you give gratitude? What is the practice? There is a Tony Robbins video, and he calls it priming, and giving gratitude is part of his priming exercise. You could, of course, just sit and think and give thanks for the food you're going to eat today. But I think that a better way to do it is to actually recall a time when you were eating and you were really grateful for the food you had, and you can think about the people you were sharing a meal with. So if you actually think of a real event that happened, this invokes the emotions of that time. And obviously there'll be good emotions, which again helps with the stress and puts things into a different light. And you could also think of something or sit and recall a moment when you had, again, when you had a lot of energy, like the visualization, and you could give gratitude for that. So all sorts of things you could do, all sorts of things you can think about, but the idea is to tap in to the emotion you felt at the time, and to really try and feel it, really try and put yourself back in that time. One of the when I'm practicing gratitude, one of the times I remember is when I climbed up a very big waterfall in Thailand, and I turned round. I'd been climbing for quite a while, and I hadn't turned around for a while, and I stopped, turned around, and I just stood and looked at the beauty of the landscape, of the jungle, while I was stood on the waterfall. And obviously it took a lot of energy to get up the waterfall, so that is something that I also use. So plenty of things that you can think about to help you put things into perspective and to combat any negative emotions you're feeling. I'm sure you've heard it all before. I'm sure you've looked up, researched how to get a good night's sleep. So what else could I add to that? Well, I guess it would be, how disciplined are you about doing it? A way to keep disciplined, of course, is to keep a sleep diary. But for me, there are some pretty simple, basic things that I do. And when I forget to do them, then I'm going to struggle to get a good night's sleep. So the first one that I've noted is, don't fall asleep on the couch. The first few hours of sleep are some of the most important. So if you fall asleep on the couch or anywhere that's not in your bed that you're not going to stay, then you're going to have to get up at some point and move to bed. That is a disturbance in your sleep cycles. The old 8 hours. Do we need 8 hours? Is anyone sleeping for 8 hours? Not me. I think that for me, probably if I get 7 hours, then I'm probably going to have a good day the next day. So let's have a look at insomnia. I'll talk about insomnia. How to combat or tackle insomnia. There are two types as far as I can see, as far as I'm concerned: not being able to get to sleep, or waking up in the middle of the night and not being able to get back to sleep. Well, my strategy is the same for both. So if I'm struggling to sleep, which doesn't really happen to me, what happens to me is I can fall asleep very easily, but I often wake up in the middle of the night, which, if we wanted to talk about that at length, is quite natural and normal. We would have woken up at some point when we lived as a tribal people, going around in groups, tribes. We would have woken up to check if there was danger, which is all very well, but not so great if you can't get back to sleep. So, strategies for both situations. You can stretch. Again, there's some really nice, easy, simple stretching routines you can find on YouTube that give your whole body a stretch. So you can either stretch before you go to bed. You can stretch if you wake up and can't get back to sleep. So what I do is get up, have a stretch, and then I lie back down in bed. I do some very simple, relaxing breathing exercises that will take me maybe 4 or 5 minutes, and then I will just simply lie down and focus on breath coming out of my nose. So nasal breathing, not breathing in any particular way, just breathing naturally. And I would say 9 times out of 10, I suddenly think, oh, I didn't have that thought. Where did that thought come from? Or I wake up and it's 2 hours later. So that is my strategy for insomnia. And of course, there is the obvious stuff. So when to have your last meal before you go to bed. I feel I have my last meal, I guess, at least 2 hours before I go to bed. And if you use any nicotine, patches, vapes, tobacco, whatever, then obviously you should stop. But if you're still using it, then try to stop at least a couple of hours before you go to bed. And likewise with coffee, so you know all this stuff, I'm sure. If you're struggling at the moment with CFS in a way, if you're having a lot of difficulties at the moment, then really it's best just to stop all stimulants altogether. But if you're struggling to do that, then things like coffee. I have my last coffee 11 o'clock in the morning. It takes apparently something like 8 hours for caffeine to leave your system. Okay, so naps. To nap or not to nap? I personally do, but not very often. I'd say that I no more than 30 minutes for me, so I'll stick my alarm on to wake me up 30 minutes later to stop myself from sleeping too long and then interrupting my sleep later that night. I find that naps can also energise me, so
They're not called a power nap for no reason. I can have a nap, and if I am feeling fatigued, I can have a nap, 30 minutes, and it'll give me enough energy to get through the day. Obviously, you don't want to nap in the evening before you go to bed. What else is there to talk about napping? Well, if I've forgotten something, I'll stick it in the PDF at the end. But that is basically it. Again, very simple stuff.
What can we say about relationships? Well, for me, again, I'm just going to talk about myself and how I look at relationships, in what different angles and aspects, and why I do. Obviously, I'm not going to advocate for not speaking to someone or any of that kind of stuff. So what I will say about it, though, however, is try to be selective, or at least I try to be selective in who I spend time with. Obviously, that's not always possible with people who are close to you, family members, colleagues, friends, etc. But I find in life that there are people who can be, I'm sure they don't intend to be, but they can be energy vampires. So who am I talking about? What kind of person is an energy vampire? So for me, an energy vampire would be someone who just really has a negative, very negative outlook on life. Any subject you bring up, or any subject that they may bring up, and they start talking in a negative light, and you try to bring it round to something positive, or try to put it in perspective, but they are determined. They are determined to always look on the negative side of life. And also people who are constantly critical. If you suggest something, they'll poo-poo it. They'll shoot it down. They'll find a negative way to look at something, an idea, a suggestion, whatever it might be. Which, of course, constructive criticism should be welcomed. But unfortunately, that's not always the case. For example, talking about the kind of people who, if you said you were thinking of starting a business, they'd very quickly pipe up and let you know that the majority of businesses fail in the first year. That kind of person. So people who, in my opinion, if they don't have any hope for their own futures, or they feel that they have failed in some way, shape or form or the other, unfortunately, there are people who try to keep others down who do have hope or do have ambitions. Obviously, if you do have a friend or someone close to you and they are going through a very difficult time, I am not saying don't speak to them or anything like that. All really I would say about that kind of stuff is to be self-aware and to monitor yourself, observe yourself, and if you do observe that it's having a negative effect on you, or a negative effect on your own outlook, a negative effect on your own energy levels, then just to be aware of it, to monitor it, and if you can, limit your time with that person or those people. And again, to reiterate, if someone's very down, going through a hard time, obviously support them. but try not to do it at your own expense. Because, of course, if you can't help yourself, if you're not as, I don't know, healthy or in a place you want to be, or in a position to help somebody, then you obviously have to be aware of that. And you can't help people until you help yourself. You know, important to get yourself in order first. Okay, supplements. This is going to be a very brief one. The only time I tried supplements, vitamins, whatever, this is going back a good few years ago now. I tried some B vitamins. I can't remember exactly what they were, probably multi-B vitamins. When I first tried them, I guess it must have been a week, well, maybe a week, I did feel change, did feel a difference. But after that week, I continued taking them. I didn't make any changes, as far as I can recall. I didn't make any changes. And they didn't seem to work anymore. So I'm pretty sure I didn't change anything else. So that was my very brief experience of supplements. I did finish them. I came to the end of the bottle and I ordered some more. But yeah, no effect. If you have tried supplements, if you've had success with something, then feel free to share. But really for me, that made me focus more on getting vitamins from natural sources. Food, sun, etc. So, who is Wim Hof and what does he have to potentially do with chronic fatigue syndrome? For those of you who don't know, Wim Hof is also known as the Iceman. He has broken all sorts of various endurance records, for example, swimming under ice, all that kind of good stuff. And he was someone I looked into to see if his method of deep breathing and cold water immersion would be something that would help with my energy levels. I'll stick some links in the description so you can have a good look for yourselves. I didn't do it long enough. I didn't practice his method for long enough to ascertain whether or not it was effective for chronic fatigue. However, there were some conclusions I came to. For example, I find it more effective if I take a cold bath or do cold water swimming as opposed to a shower, although a shower is good enough. It still worked for me. Obviously, a word of caution, if you have a heart condition or anything like that, any kind of medical condition, then you need to be careful and cautious because, well, it can be a shock to your body if you immerse yourself in cold water. Even having a cold shower can give you a bit of a shock. I had a cold bath in Sarajevo a few years ago when I was living there. Outside there was deep snow and I don't know, maybe it was an act of desperation or whatever, but I filled up a very deep bath of water and just climbed in it just to see what would happen. And, well, I did feel energised, and when I have a cold shower now I feel energised, but I generally find that it's a very temporary. When I'm in the cold, I feel energy, but I don't know, maybe 5-10 minutes later, after I'm out of the cold and warmed up, the situation returns to the same. So I used to still feel fatigued. There are, however, other benefits I found doing this, and namely, it's good for my mental discipline, I found. If it's, early in the morning, or really any part of the day, getting in a cold shower is the last thing you often want to do. So overcoming that block in your mind, in your brain, trying to convince you not to turn the cold water tap on, and you overcome that and you just turn it on, you just do it. I've found that this has helped me in other areas of life, of being able to get on with things that I need to do and things that I don't want to do. So it helps with mind over matter, as it were, keeping me disciplined and enabling me to have greater control over my mind.
Yep.
Okay, so what else can we say about that? Yep, so the deep breathing, very simple. You take 30 deep breaths. Wim Hof says it doesn't make any difference whether you take the breaths through your mouth or through your nose. So you take 30 deep breaths, you exhale. On your 30th exhale, you hold your breath. You hold your breath for at least 1 minute, or for however long you can. And after the minute's up, you take in a deep breath and you hold it for 15 seconds. Even though his method wasn't conclusive to me to be effective for CFS, I am convinced by the benefits to the immune system. So obviously, if we're thinking about the causes of chronic fatigue, one of them being post-viral infection, then obviously having a strong immune system is going to be beneficial. And you should, I advise watching Wim Hof anyway, because he's a very positive character. He's full of energy and inspiring, in my opinion. So how did I come to feel much better? Was it all just a fluke? I personally don't believe it was a fluke. The reason being is, if I have a relapse now, I can pretty easily and quickly identify why I've relapsed or had a mini crash. I feel even on a bad day these days, is still much, much better than when I was at my worst. So I can quickly fix or identify what I did or what I didn't do in order to get back on track. And I also believe that if I knew back then what I now know, what I've gone through via trial and error, I personally believe I would have recovered a lot quicker. Is there anything more to say about that? No, I don't think so. It will be interesting for any of you who do implement the things I talk about in your lives. It would be interesting to see any changes that you experience. So again, if I decide to put up a Facebook page, Instagram or whatever, then that'd also be a good place to discuss such things. Academic papers, articles. I'm not saying not to read them. Some of them can be very insightful. But I would exercise some caution because they're not the greatest communicators, and often they're talking from academic to academic, and it can be very laborious looking up different words, meanings, things you don't understand, and when you're very fatigued, this is a real drag. And I'm not entirely sure they are written for general public, but I also find this on YouTube videos, that when you have a couple of academics talking to each other, it's very difficult to follow. And when you just want simple, quick answers, they're not the best sources to go to. Not saying don't do it, but for me it could become quite frustrating and didn't do my overall well-being too good because of the frustration and the laboriousness, is that a word? The laborious nature of it, shall we say. And it really was the last thing I wanted to do when I was very fatigued. I also found that they often led to something to be paid for, whether it be supplements, consultations, things to further download, and they would just lead you down the garden path, and you'd be none the wiser after it. There are good articles out there from professionals who can communicate effectively, and I would just keep an eye out on that stuff. I mean, I used to subscribe to, I don't know, three or four people that spoke about adrenal fatigue and CFS, and it didn't go anywhere. There are much better articles to read. You just really have to identify them, and it's not difficult. If you find something and the writing's clear, it's short, it's precise, yeah, stick with them. Okay, forums. This is actually how start again. Okay, so I was looking at Wim Hof when I first came across him and wondering whether or not his method or his practice would be useful for chronic fatigue syndrome. And while searching, I happened across a forum. The same question was posted by a young woman. I presume she was young because she said that she was struggling with her exams. And as I went through the comments, I was a little bit disappointed, to say the least. There were people who were telling her that she'd never get better, that there was nothing she could do, that she would just have to accept that was her lot in life from now on, which was completely different from my own mindset. My own mindset was, I'm going to find a way. I'm going to find a way out of this, and I'm going to keep on searching until I do. And when I do find a way, I'm going to share it with other people. So it was, a lot of the people on there had a very different mindset to what I had. And, well, again, it comes back down to people you keep company with, doesn't it? As I discussed in relationships, those naysaying types, that'll never work, there's no point in doing this, there's no point in trying that, etc., etc., etc. And I think these kind of people, they brand themselves, they give themselves an identity that they then become. They materialize and create their own destiny, their own path in life. What else to say about that? Yeah, I guess it also comes back to visualizations. So another important part of why I visualize things is so I don't get lost or stuck in the doldrums like some old sailors with no wind to power their sails. You're not going anywhere. You've kind of predestined that you're not going there, and there's nothing you can do about it. You know, not great people to associate with. And unfortunately, there were lots of these very similar negative comments. People who have told themselves they're never going to get better. Well, they've just created their own destiny, haven't they? Unfortunately, they probably never will get better unless they have a shift in their mindset and give themselves a chance and start implementing things, taking action instead of just allowing it to happen to them and not doing anything about it. Which, again, brings me back to the whole forum thing. If I do start it, I'm not saying, if you are having a really difficult time and you do need some help and support, then by all means do so. What I'm really saying is, if we do it, let's try and avoid telling people, they're never going to recover. That doesn't work. Perfectly fine to say, I tried that, it didn't work for me. Does anybody have any suggestions? This is what I did. Can anyone see what else I could have done? That is all good stuff. That's what we want. What we don't want is the naysaying types. And again, just to reiterate, if you are having a hard time with this, then obviously reach out to someone. Okay, expectations. I'm sure a lot of people will be asking themselves, well, how long will it take for me to recover? Unfortunately, that is impossible for me to say. I don't know anyone's personal situation. I don't know if you have the same thing that I had. Obviously, no way of me knowing your personal circumstances, but I'll just go back to what I said before, which was, I believe that if I had implemented the changes sooner that I discovered through trial and error, I believe I would have recovered a lot sooner than what I did. There will be, if you have the same experience as I did, over a long period of time and after implementing lifestyle changes, I had days when I had really good days. They might only last a day, sometimes 2 days. This over time gradually increased. But what would happen is, say for example, I had a good 3 days and I got all excited and I thought, wow, I have finally cracked it. I have solved the issue. I have recovered. I'm on my way to sunlit highlands, dancing through flowery meadows, etc. Then I would have a great big crash, and that crash would could go on for days, could go on for weeks, could go on for months. But then again, I would start to have another good 1 day, 2 days, 3 days. And that can be, if you're not conscious about it, if you're not aware of it, that can be very demoralizing. If you have a high and then you have an unexpected crash. So that can put you into a state of kind of despair, and you will begin to think like the people in the forum. I'm never going to get through this. This is never going to work. I'm just going to have to accept it. And when you go down that mindset, is you stop doing things, you become demotivated. So I would say if that happens to you, then I can tell you that my life is completely different now. I very, very rarely have bad days. And like I said before, it's easy for me to fix. It's because I haven't been disciplined about something, generally. And just see it as when you have those high energy days, just look at it as light at the end of the tunnel. And if you do have a crash, then know that it is possible to get back on track and to continue heading where you want to head to. What else is there to say about that? I think that is probably it.
Well, that was a long video, wasn't it? I only intended to make it 20 or 30 minutes, but the more I thought about it, the more I recalled, and turns out I had quite a lot to say about it. Well, I feel my debt to the universe, to the Lord, to my inner champion, or whatever that voice was that guided me, has been paid off. And if it helps one person, it'll all be worth it. So, to wrap it all up, let's go through some key points, some key takeaways. Okay, so what is it? What is chronic fatigue syndrome? Well, in my opinion, it is a healing process of the body, the mind, and you might even say the spirit. The spirit because of the meditation stuff, the giving gratitude. The mind, obviously the stress, the body, self-explanatory. All putting the energy back out there, gently and slowly, to bring it all back. So, talking about stress, if it is caused by stress, then the obvious answer is to de-stress. If it's caused by, for example, unchallenged trauma, all that kind of stuff, or just a build-up of stress for various reasons, life reasons, normal life reasons that we go through, and hasn't been challenged, we need to cope with it, deal with it, then yep, the answer is to de-stress. If it is caused by a post-viral syndrome, then we need to be of healthy body, healthy mind, at least, and healthy spirit. And again, either way, for me, the process be exactly the same, no matter what the cause is. Okay, so on to the diary. It is really important to keep a diary. You'll be able to track what you did. And in that case, if you have a really good day, you'll be able to look past the past few days, see what you did, find out what worked, and also vice versa. If you have a particularly bad day, you'll be able to see what you did or what you didn't do. be able to see what worked and what didn't. I would also suggest you stick to something for 2 to 4 weeks to give it time to work. Obviously, if you've been going through this for a very long time, it's not going to be, I don't think, an easy process of something that happens overnight or over the course of a week. You might well be in it for a little while. Okay, let me just check my notes. Okay, yep, so if what happens to you, that happened to me, i.e. you think you're out in the open, you think you're in the clear, but you have a relapse, then don't be discouraged. You know, if you happen to fall back into a state of fatigue, don't despair. I discovered this was just part of the process. I think that is one of the key points to take away, because it can be demoralising. You just really need to accept it, accept that it's happened, have a look back through your diaries, everything we've recorded, see if you can see a pattern. It might well be that you can't. So in that case, just keep going. And remember to be the captain of your own ship and to get back on course. The other important thing is to try and be disciplined, try and be consistent. Oh, how rude. And that way, you know, through being consistent, through being disciplined, you'll keep on course, keep on track. But at the same time, if you do, I don't know if you, I mean, for me it certainly happened. There were periods when I just thought I couldn't be bothered, or I stopped exercising, meditating, recording how much I drank. Obviously don't be hard on yourself. If you're hard on yourself, that'll cause you more stress, and that obviously won't do you any good. So just keep going, be consistent, don't beat yourself up if you take a break. Where to go from here? So I'll leave some links at the bottom of the video that will take you to a website. You can download various PDFs for free. I'll include templates, things you can print out for an energy diary, sleep diary perhaps, definitely an energy diary, and just everything we've covered. I'll also leave some links to some paid stuff if you don't want to, well, it's up to you. I'll leave some links to some paid stuff, but everything you need, everything I've covered, every process I went through and that I believe helped me to recover is all for free, of course. So I wish you the best of luck and good journey, or a good path onto your own recovery.